All right, welcome back everyone to the deep dive. You know, it's funny, we often get caught up in this idea that massive change requires, well, massive effort. Like, we have to make these huge, sweeping overhauls to our lives to see any real progress.
Right, and that can be so overwhelming.
Absolutely. It's almost like setting yourself up for failure before you even begin. But today, we're diving into a concept that flips that whole notion on its head.
Yeah, and I'm really excited about this one, the power of micro habits. It's about tiny actions, these almost ridiculously small steps that can actually lead to some pretty amazing results over time.
Yeah, and we're basing our deep dive today on the power of micro habits, tiny actions, big change, which really digs into the nitty-gritty of how these little shifts can create some pretty significant long-term transformation. And for anyone listening who's feeling a bit stuck or intimidated by those big, audacious goals, this one's for you. We're going to break down exactly what these micro habits are, why they work, and most importantly, how you can actually start incorporating them into your daily life right now.
I love that. Taking that feeling of being overwhelmed out of the equation and turning it into something that feels manageable and even kind of fun.
Exactly. So let's start with the basics. What exactly are we talking about when we say micro habit? Paint us a picture here.
So imagine the smallest, simplest action you can think of, something that takes barely any effort. That's the foundation of a micro habit. It's a teeny tiny action that you do consistently, and over time, it contributes to a much bigger goal.
Okay, so give us some concrete examples. I'm all about practicality here.
Absolutely. So let's say your goal is to read more. Instead of pressuring yourself to finish a whole book every week, your micro habit could be as simple as reading just one page every day.
One page, that feels almost too easy.
Right. But that's the point. And if you're trying to get fitter, maybe you commit to doing just one push-up a day. Or, for better hydration, you make a point of drinking a glass of water right when you wake up. And if you've been wanting to start journaling, well, your micro habit could be writing just one sentence each day.
See, now those are starting to sound doable. Even on those crazy busy days, I could probably manage one sentence in a journal.
Exactly. And that's where the magic of micro habits really comes in. It's about removing that initial barrier, that resistance to starting, by making the first step so ridiculously small that it almost feels silly not to do it.
Okay, so we've established that they're small and manageable. But what makes them so effective? Why do these tiny actions lead to big results down the line?
So there are a few fascinating psychological principles at play here. And the first one is something called resistance to change. Our brains are wired to resist change, especially when it feels big and overwhelming. But when you break down a goal into these minuscule micro habits, your brain doesn't see it as a threat anymore. It's not intimidated. And that makes it way more likely that you'll actually follow through.
That makes sense. It's like tricking your brain into thinking, oh, this isn't a big deal. I can totally handle this.
Exactly. And the second key principle is the compound effect. This is the idea that small, consistent actions, even if they seem insignificant in the moment, accumulate over time to produce huge results. It's like that snowball rolling down a hill. Each tiny flake of snow adds a tiny bit of momentum, and before you know it, you have this massive snowball. And it's the same with micro habits. Each tiny action builds on the last, creating this upward spiral of momentum that propels you towards your goal.
So even though reading one page a day might not seem like much, if you stick with it, you'll have read hundreds of pages by the end of the year. It's the consistency that adds up.
Absolutely. And then there's the third powerful mechanism, which is neuroplasticity.
Yeah.
This is your brain's incredible ability to change and adapt based on your experiences. And when you consistently engage in a micro habit, you're literally rewiring your brain. Those neural pathways associated with that behavior get stronger and stronger, making the habit more automatic and easier to stick with.
It's like creating a well-worn path in your brain, making it easier to follow that path each time.
Perfect analogy. So by understanding these principles, we can start to see how those seemingly insignificant actions can actually create some pretty significant changes over time.
This is all great in theory, but how do we actually put this into practice? What are some concrete strategies for making these micro habits stick?
Well, our source outlines some really effective strategies. And the first one, as we've already touched on, is to start ridiculously small. I mean, really tiny. Choose an action that's so easy you could do it on your worst day. That way there's no excuse not to do it, and you're building that crucial consistency right from the start.
So no more intimidating yourself with these grand plans. It's about shrinking those actions down to the bare minimum.
Precisely. And another great technique is called habit stacking. This is where you link your new micro habit to an existing habit, something you already do without thinking. It's like piggybacking on an existing behavior.
Ooh, I like that. Give us some examples. How would you actually do that?
So let's say you always brush your teeth in the morning. That's a pretty solid habit for most people. Well, right after you brush your teeth, you could add one squat. Or after you pour your morning coffee, you commit to reading one sentence of a book.
I see. So you're using that existing habit as a trigger for the new one.
Exactly. And the source also gives the example of taking one deep breath right after you lock your phone screen at night. It's a tiny mindfulness practice tied to an existing bedtime routine.
Okay, so habit stacking is a clever way to make it easier to remember and actually do those micro habits. But what about those inevitable days when life gets in the way and we slip up? Does that mean we've failed?
Our source emphasizes that consistency is way more important than perfection. It's okay to miss a day here and there. Life happens. What matters is that you get back on track as soon as possible. Don't let one missed day derail your entire progress. It's the overall pattern of consistency that counts.
That's a relief to hear. It takes the pressure off feeling like we have to be perfect robots.
Right. It's about progress, not perfection. Now, as your micro-habit becomes more and more ingrained, you can start thinking about gradually increasing it.
So once that one push-up feels too easy, maybe you bump it up to 2.
Exactly. It should feel like a natural progression, not a sudden leap. And another thing that can be super helpful is tracking your progress.
You mean like marking it off on a calendar or something?
Yeah, even something that simple can be really motivating. It gives you a visual representation of your consistency, all those tiny wins adding up over time.
I can see how that would be encouraging, especially when you're feeling a bit discouraged. It's like, look, I've done this every day for a week. I can keep going.
Exactly. It's a way to celebrate those small victories along the way.
Okay, so we've got the basics down. Now let's talk about where these micro habits can make a real difference in our lives. What are some specific areas where this approach can be particularly effective?
Well, our source highlights a few key areas, and one of them is physical health. And the great thing about micro habits is that they can easily fit into even the busiest schedules.
Because who has time for a 2-hour workout every day?
Right. But you probably have time to take one deep breath before each meal. That's a micro habit that can actually improve your mindfulness around eating and digestion over time.
Interesting. It's amazing how such a simple action can have such a ripple effect.
Right. And another one is walking for just 1 minute every hour if you have a desk job. It's a tiny bit of movement that can add up to some significant health benefits over time.
So easy, yet so often overlooked. Just getting up and moving a little bit can make a difference.
Absolutely. And even a 30-second stretch when you wake up can do wonders for your flexibility and set a positive tone for the day.
These are all great for the body. What about mental well-being?
Well, the source suggests some really impactful micro habits for that too, like writing down one thing you're grateful for each day. It's a quick and easy way to shift your focus toward the positive, and it can have a big impact on your overall mood and outlook.
I love that. It's like a little dose of positivity every day.
And another one is taking a few deep breaths before you check your phone in the morning. It's a way to create a little buffer between you and the digital world, which can help to reduce stress and anxiety.
Because we all know how overwhelming that constant influx of information can be.
Absolutely. And then there's the simple act of smiling at yourself in the mirror. It sounds cheesy, but it can actually boost your self-confidence and self-esteem.
You know, I've heard that before. It's about sending yourself a little bit of love.
Exactly. And when it comes to productivity, micro habits can be game changers.
Okay, tell us more about that. Productivity hacks are always welcome.
Well, one great micro habit is to start your workday by writing down the single most important task you want to accomplish that day. It helps you prioritize and focus your energy on what really matters.
It's like setting your intention for the day.
Exactly. And then there's the micro habit of organizing just one item on your desk each day. It might not seem like much, but over time, it can transform your workspace from chaotic to clutter-free.
I can definitely see how that would make a difference. It's about those small, consistent steps toward a bigger goal.
Precisely. And another one is to spend just 1 minute prioritizing your to-do list before you dive into work. It can save you a lot of time and energy in the long run.
All of these really highlight the power of intentionality, even in the smallest actions.
Absolutely. And finally, let's talk about personal growth and learning. One great micro habit in this area is to commit to reading just one paragraph of a book each day. It's such a small commitment, but it can lead to some serious reading progress over time.
I like that. It removes the excuse of I don't have time to read.
Right. And then there's learning one new word each day, which can gradually expand your vocabulary without feeling overwhelming. And listening to just 1 minute of an educational podcast or audiobook can expose you to new ideas and knowledge without a huge time commitment.
It's amazing how much you can accomplish with just a few minutes of focused effort each day.
Exactly. So if we were to sum up the key takeaway from all of this, it's that micro habits are about harnessing the power of small, consistent actions to create lasting change in every area of your life.
It's not about overnight transformations, but about the steady accumulation of those tiny steps day after day.
Precisely. And with that in mind, I'd like to leave you with this thought. What's one seemingly insignificant action you could start today that could lead to some pretty amazing results a year from now?
That's something to really think about. It's about recognizing that those tiny choices we make each day can have a much bigger impact than we realize.
Absolutely. It's the power of the compound effect in action. And with that, we'll wrap up this deep dive into the fascinating world of micro habits.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. Until next time.